Let me introduce some of my colleagues today for these sessions. So we have Shashini Gregory. So Shashini is a data visualization expert at OCTAVE. So she has been with the London Stock Exchange for maybe 3 to 4 years, and she has working with OCTAVE, and she's the head of data visualization team at OCTAVE. And also we have Thiraj. So he's working as a data scientist at OCTAVE. So he has been in a union as a data scientist in Union Assurance and also with OCTAVE. And he has done his studies in UTS in Sydney, in Australia, and myself. So these are the people going to conduct today's sessions. So the session is consists of 3 parts. So the first one is we are going to introduce the domain that you are going to solve the problem. So that will give you quite a bit of information, like what is the domain that you are going to solve the problem. And also we will provide some details about and some of the key terms too. So note down those key terms, and if you have any questions, do ask during that session. So this is the opportunity for you to talk. So I would prefer if you can talk and ask this stuff. And then we'll have a small session about the data visualization and why it is important. And I also want to see, like, you spend quite a bit of time about the visualization techniques as well during the case study. And then at the end, we'll very briefly, I will outline like some tips to create slides and also how to finalize your Viva presentation as well. Okay, so the question that you are going to solve is, it's in the insurance domain. So, to provide quite a bit of information, let me introduce my colleague Thiraj. So he will give you very good information about insurance domain. He's an expert data scientist working in insurance. So you can get quite a bit of information around with him. And please do ask any questions if you have. So this is the opportunity for you to ask questions. Okay. Okay, over to you, Thiraj.
Thank you, Rajitha. So good evening all. Hope you guys had a good week so far. Right, so let's talk about life insurance, right? So before we get to life insurance, I'm pretty sure all of you must have heard the word insurance by itself, right? So let's look at an example of what I meant by insurance, right? So I'm pretty sure most of you are aware of car insurance, right? So whenever you buy a car, you're supposed to get an insurance, right? It's actually compulsory now. So what does that insurance mean? Right? What does it give you, right? So it's basically saying, okay, I'm going to pay the company, the insurance company, a monthly fee or something, but for a given particular period, and I want to make sure that if something does happen to the car, that the company will cover it, right? So in terms of like a direct definition of what insurance is basically, you're having a contract between yourself and an insurance company, saying that please do cover me for a certain period of time, and I'll be paying you a monthly amount of monthly X amount until 20 years or 30 years or whatnot, right? And in case something does happen to your car or vehicle, the insurance company will cover it.
They will.
Right? So that is, hello. Yeah. So that is technically what insurance would mean, right? Now, if we apply the same concept, like use the same concept as onto a life insurance, you're basically saying, okay, I'm going to have a contract between myself and the insurance company, and I want the insurance company to guarantee me that they will cover me in an unconditional death, or if I'm hospitalized, and they will have a financial security. They'll provide you a financial security to either you or nominees you provide, right? So what that means is the company actually protects your life. If something happens to you, let's say in an event of a death, the money you have paid them so far, they will obviously, based on certain ratios, They have a certain amount of coverage that you decide when you initially start your insurance policy. And then that amount will be given back to you or the people you nominate, right? So that's like the high level of what insurance is and how it applies to life insurance, right? So there are many different terminologies we use in insurance. There's actually quite a lot, right? But the most common ones are what we're going to go through right now. So these terminologies are really good for you to keep in mind when you're tracking the case on Saturday, right? Because I'm pretty sure you're going to face a lot of actually almost all of these terms when you're tracking the case on Saturday. Okay. So now let me just take you guys through the process of what happens in insurance, right? So I'm pretty sure maybe most of you, at least some of you, would have actually met an insurance advisor, or maybe an insurance advisor would have come to you looking for a insurance sale, right? What happens then is so these advisors advise you on your insurance. They sort of provide you information of how insurance should happen, what is insurance, why you should get insured, and all these things, right? Let's say you are interested in having a life insurance. So the first thing what happens is the advisors, the people who go and work on the field and go and actually sell these insurance policies are called advisors or agents, right? So if an agent approaches you, right, and if you're interested, what the agent will do is they'll provide you with a quotation, right? So a quotation is saying, okay, I want this type of an insurance for this for like X amount of years with a monthly payment of this much, and so on. Right? It's just a really rough document. They don't even take your details or anything. Maybe just like phone number just to get in touch with you, right? So that's a quotation. Okay, and obviously agents can give you multiple quotations, right? And let's say you are interested in one of those quotations, and you say, okay, you know what, I think I like this quotation, and let's go ahead with this, right? The next step of that is the agent or the advisor will provide you with a proposal. So the proposal is actually a second step of the quotation, whereas it has your actual details. They gather your actual details. They gather your the time you actually want to have the insurance, how much you want to pay for your insurance, and all the solid information, right? And once that is also okay, what they do is then they pass it on to the insurance company, and then the insurance company does a few checks on, in terms of medical checks and all that, and then they convert it into a policy, right? So what you get in return is a policy. Okay, so policy is basically the final document, the contract between yourself and the company, right? If you see the point number 3 in the slide, that is what policy is. Right? So that's the final document of the contract between yourself and the company, right? Cool. Next, we have, if you look at what enforced and lapsed, right? The points number 1 and point number 2. What enforced means is basically, it's sort of a second word for active, okay? We say the policy is enforced. What that means is, okay, your policy, your current life insurance policy is in an active state, right? That means you have been paying all your premiums. Okay, that's another term I will explain later. You have been paying your premiums on time, and your policy is up to date and is currently active. All right. Then let's say, okay, in case you missed your premiums and you forgot to pay, or you couldn't pay for a certain amount of time, let's say 1 month or 2 months, you missed your payments, your policy automatically becomes lapsed, right? Point number 2. What this means is, okay, your policy is inactive due to non-payment. You haven't paid, so we have lapsed your policy. That means when you're in a lapsed state, and if something does happen to you, you can't claim your insurance, right? So you will always you should make sure that it's always enforced. Now, I've been talking about this premium word a lot, right? So what is premium, right? So that is one very important word that you all have to keep in mind. So, the direct definition of premium is what you see here, right? It's a periodic payment you make to your insurance company to keep your policy active or keep your policy enforced. right? So in the current scenario of the insurance domain of what we are going to be working on Saturday, there are several ways or payment modes or methods, right? I would say payment modes involved, which is monthly, quarterly, half yearly, annually, and there is another one called single, right? What this means is basically the time period or how like your periodic payment method, right? So if you say, okay, you have a monthly policy, that means you are paying your premiums every month, right? If you say quarterly policy, it means you're paying your premiums every quarter, and half yearly twice a year, and annually once a year, right? And which is whatever is not mentioned here is a single payment, right? So what single payment means is, okay, you have a policy, you pay it only once, so you pay the entire amount of your coverage once, and that's it, and your policy is going to be active till whenever you have till whenever you have paid the last date to be. Yeah. So do you have any questions on these five or whatever we discussed for so far? Or is it all clear?
Yes, sir.
Awesome. Okay, so if we go to the next slide, you'll see a few more terminologies used in life insurance, right? And the important one, or I would say another common one, just like premium, is something called sum assured. Okay, so this sum assured, it refers to a pre-decided amount payable to the policyholder or beneficiary on the occurrence of an insured event. Okay, so what that means is, okay, when you're signing your initial policy, right, the contract between yourself and a company, you're going to decide, okay, this is the amount of premiums I'm going to pay either monthly or quarterly or annually or whatever. And you're going to decide on how much you're going to get back or how much you're being covered. Okay, that is something not you don't decide directly, but it's something that is been calculated from the insurance company based on how much you're paying your premiums. Okay, and till what extent and which periodic method, right? At a monthly, half yearly, or so on. Okay, so this sum assured, in a nutshell or in an example, I will tell you what this is. Let's just say, okay, you have a policy, you're paying a policy at a monthly level, and every month you're paying 5,000 rupees. Okay, based on that, and let's just say you're going to pay for you want the coverage of your insurance to be 10 years. Okay, based on that, your coverage and your premium and certain obviously other factors, the company will say, okay, for those 10 years, this is the sum assured we are going to give. Okay, let's just say 1 million rupees. Okay, what happens is, in case within those 10 years something does happen to you, that 1 million rupees will be either given to you based on what the incident that happens, or in case of your death, it will be given to whoever you have nominated, right? So that 1 million amount is the sum assured amount, right? Next thing is something called a rider. Okay, so what a rider means is, it's the simplest way to say what a rider is. It's just an additional sort of additional feature or additional product you want with your policy, right? So the definition over here you see is it's an add-on coverage to your life insurance policy that provides additional benefits or exclusion, right? As an example, obviously, let's just say you have a policy like a educational policy, right? That is your product. You have an education policy. Down the line, you think, okay, maybe it's good to sort of have a medical coverage as well, right? And then you can add these certain riders which actually covers your medical coverage, right? So it's sort of like an add-on, right? So it's like, okay, if you buy an iPhone, you want to add an headset to it or something like that. It's just an add-on coverage, right? So these riders, there are lots of riders, right? It depends on what you want, but this in an actual business, there are heaps and lots of riders you can add on. Okay, are we clear with the rider part? Yeah, that's
Uh,
that's
Do you have any questions?
so is it like a extra option?
exactly, it is like an extra option,
Okay, sir.
right? Yeah, keep the rider part in mind, okay? Because it might be very useful when it comes to the case study on Saturday. Now there are some other terms, right? So we did discuss about enforced and lapsed, right? Enforced is when your policy is active. Lapsed is when you have missed a payment and your policy is inactive. Now there's
Thiraj,
two
just
other.
can I ask a question?
Yep.
Yeah, can we add the riders at any time so for their benefits?
Yes, you can write at any time. Yeah. So just as we discussed on enforced and lapsed, there are two other sort of statuses, I would say, right? So if you look at a policy status, you will see enforced or lapsed or surrendered or terminated, right? So we talked about enforced and lapsed. So now you will see the two words, the last one and the third one, surrendered and terminated. Now, if you do read this definition correctly, you will think, oh, what's the difference? It's the same thing, right? Because surrender says a full cancellation of your insurance policy. Terminated says the policy can no longer be active, and you wonder why it's why you're saying that it's two different things. The same thing. It's actually two different things. The reason what we mean by surrender is the customer is willingly stopping the policy, right? So the customer says, okay, look, I don't want to pay this anymore. I can't pay this anymore due to some reason. I want to stop this. So the customer surrenders, and then we put the policy as a surrendered policy. What terminated means is it can mean two things. Okay, if the policy is matured. Now, what does matured mean? Right. So, okay, let's say you have a policy. You want the coverage for 10 years. Okay, so for you pay your policy, it's been active, it's been enforced, and you have done your payments for 10 years. So after 10 years, your policy is finished, right? You have gone that 10 years, you have paid that 10 years, it's all good, and it's finished. And the moment it's finished, we say it's a matured policy, right? So that means you have gone according to the plan, the coverage is complete, and you are matured. So that's a matured. So when it's a matured policy, the status of that policy will also be shown as terminated. Okay. The other reason how it can be terminated is when your policy is lapsed. Okay. After a certain amount of time, if the customer does not pay, we say, okay, the customer is not going to pay, it's not going to come back. So we are going to terminate that policy, right? Because it's no point keeping a policy for a customer who's not going to be paying. Okay. But remember, it's after a certain period of time of being lapsed. Okay. Not directly after lapse is going to be terminated. No, it has to be lapsed for a certain amount of time. And after that, we'll consider it as terminated.
So, sir, if it is terminated, there is no use in that policy, no, sir. After that,
Exactly. No
okay.
use. Right.
So the is same applies for the surrender also.
Same applies for surrender.
Okay.
Because the difference is the customer is willingly doing it. The other one is the customer is unintentionally doing it.
So is there a payment we have to do if we have to terminate to surrender, like after a certain amount of time they have maybe paid enough or they have anyway they have paid some amount of money, so do we have to return a certain amount or like we just keep the whole amount as they had paid?
No. So if the customer has a terminated policy, the company will still keep the amount because it's a contract, right? So you have given a contract saying, okay, I am going to pay this amount monthly till this amount of time, and you haven't paid it after a certain amount of time. So therefore, that money obviously cannot be returned to the customer. It will be with the company. Right? Is that clear?
Yeah, thank you.
Awesome. Right. And one last word or important term is the word actually is term. Okay. What I mean by term is the defined period of coverage, right? So I think we discussed that, saying, okay, when you are giving a policy or when you're having a policy, initially when you decide on your policy, how long you want your coverage for, right? It can be 5 years, 10 years, 15, 25, it all depends on you, right? So the period of coverage, the word we use for that is term. Okay, cool. Yeah, Rajitha, I think maybe we can go to the next slide, right? So now we want to talk about, what is cross-sell and upsell. Okay, this is a good slide for you all to listen up to, because you can get a good idea of what actually cross-sell is and what upsell means, right? So upsell is uh, if we define it in terms of like a direct definition, we would say upsell is a process of upgrading the customer's current item, or to purchase a better item than the current item, right? So I think the picture over here actually gives the entire picture of what upsell and cross sell means, right? So upsell is okay, you have your old Nokia 6600 phone, right, and you want to upgrade it to iPhone. So that is an upsell. You are just upgrading whatever you have to something better. Okay. Now, what's the difference between upsell and cross-sell? So cross-sell is actually the process of providing additional items to go with your current item, right? Okay, let's say you have an iPhone. Okay. So you have an iPhone. Now, what about adding a headset to it? What about adding Bluetooth speakers or something like that, right? So these are additional products that go with your current item, right? So upsell is upgrading your current item to something better. Cross-sell is adding a different item to whatever you have already. Are we clear with the two definitions?
So is it like adding a rider, right?
Okay, good question. Adding a rider, what do you think? Would it be upsell or would it be cross-sell?
It should be a
Cross-sell.
cross-sell.
It should be?
Cross-sell.
Cross-sell.
Okay, that is where I will slightly change your definition. Okay, now let's talk in terms of policies or insurance. That will make it easy. So if you have a policy already, right? So like I said, additional riders are additional coverages. Okay, you already have a policy, and if you're adding a rider, that is something it's like a upgrade. You have your existing product, but you want to upgrade your product to cover something else, right? So if you're having an existing product and if you want to cover something else, that would fall under upsell, right? Even though it's an additional coverage, or how we define it as an additional coverage, we are still adding it to the existing product. Like we are upgrading it to the existing, like we are upgrading the existing product.
So, sir, excuse me, sir.
Yeah.
So after adding the additional coverage, does it override the initial coverage?
Yes.
Uh-huh.
By overriding, I would say, so you have your premiums, your existing premium, right? You pay your existing premium. When you add
Yes.
that additional coverage, or when you upgrade it, you have to, your existing policy will upgrade, and you will have to pay an extra premium, right? So it'll be on top of what you had earlier.
Okay, that's literally upgrade, no, sir.
That is literally an upgrade.
Okay,
Yes.
sir.
In
Could you,
terms of yeah, go ahead.
could you please give us an example from insurance industry for a cross-sell?
Sure. So let's say you have a policy, right? Let's say you bought a policy for an educational policy, right? And now you say, okay, you know what? Maybe I would like to think of having an investment policy, right? So you have your existing medical, educational or medical policy for the current year or the previous year, and you're saying, okay, I want to have a second policy of an investment policy or something, of a different product. So what you are going to be having, once you get your second policy, is two policies. So these are two different items, right? Two different products. Do I make myself clear? I mean, is that understandable? So let's say given a certain amount of time, you have one product, right? One policy. After a certain amount of time, you say, okay, you know what? I want to have a investment product. And then you buy another investment product on top, like you have one already, you're buying something else again, another product. Okay, so that means after some time you're going to have two products. So when you look at the first product when you had your first product, and now when you have your second product, we can say it's a cross sell because you have successfully bought a second product in the same company. Is that clear?
Yeah, it is clear. So we have, okay, now we have a clear example for this. Can you differentiate that with the upsell?
Okay, yeah. So like I mentioned earlier, let's take the riders, right, for upsell. What happens is you have a single product, right? You want to add an additional coverage or upgrade your existing product with an additional coverage, right? So after, let's say you started with a single product with no additional coverage, right? After a couple of months, you add or upgrade your existing policy or product with additional coverage. So that is upselling, right? You have upgraded it. But see, the difference is you still have only one policy. But when it comes to cross-sell, you have two policies. Your one becomes two in cross-sell. In upsell, your one still becomes upsell one, right? It remains as one policy.
Okay, thank you. Now it's clear.
Awesome. Cool. I think that is it. So if anyone has questions, now is a good time we can discuss regarding insurance or anything else.
Raja, maybe you can little bit discuss anything about downsell. Is there a concept called downsell in insurance?
There's not a concept called downsell at the moment, but there is something called, I mean, we can consider a certain aspect like downgrading your policies or something, right? The thing with downsell, I mean, there is downsell, but when it comes to insurance, what we say or do is if we do have a certain policy, and if we say we are paying 5,000 a month with the premium of 5,000 a month for a certain amount of years, that is fixed, right? So we can't go below 5,000. We can always add more coverages and go above 5,000, but we can't bring that 5,000 to 4,000. We can't say, okay, after 2-3 years, okay, maybe I'm struggling financially. Can I just pay only 4,000 a month? That cannot be done, right? In that case, what we recommend to do, or what insurance companies mostly do, is they give another policy at that time when they have financial troubles, with their premium changed to 4,000, right? It is sort of downsell, but you can't consider it entirely downsell because it's a totally different product, and the existing product which you had at 5,000 a month will be cancelled.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
So, guys, hopefully it's clear for everyone. Do you have any questions? So I think we discussed upsell, cross sales, and downgrade and downsells. Do you have any questions for him before we move to the other session?
No.
I have one question. This is from the perspective of an insurance company. So it is better if people get downsell, or they could terminate, or they could surrender, right? So from the perspective of insurance company, so it is more profitable to the company than providing the actual amount or whatever, right?
I wouldn't say it's more profitable. I would say it's a waste for the customer, right? The reason why I won't say it's profitable is because, let's say you're a paying customer of 5,000 monthly for 10 years, and you're supposed to be paying for 10 years. And after 5 years, you stopped paying. So that means you either terminated or surrendered, right? Yes, for 5,000 till 5 years times 5 years, we have that money within the company. But for the next 5 years, we don't have that money. We don't have that customer with us, right? So it's not entirely profitable just to have a policy given to a customer and then they surrender or they terminate. It won't, in terms of even in a perspective of an insurance company also, it's not profitable. The more you continue with your insurance company, the better it is for both parties.
Okay, so always then when you are building the machine learning models also, we have to think of going better like a good relationship between both parties. Like the variable should be to be better with both parties, right? Then
Ideally, in most scenarios, yes. I say most scenarios because it always depends on the business problem, right? What you want to solve. But yes, ideally, what you want to see is a good relationship between the customer and the company.
okay, thank you.
Yeah, awesome. So do you have any more questions?
Any other questions? So this is a good opportunity for you to clarify any questions. So your question is going to be in insurance.
Sir, is there any benefit for customer if they surrender over terminated?
Is there a benefit for customer if they surrender or terminated, right? Is that the question?
Yeah.
No, not really, right? So let's say yeah, go ahead.
Sir, I mean, why do people surrender if they can terminate?
Yeah, so I think I'll explain the definitions again, right? So what I meant by terminated is, yeah, there you go. So a policy is no longer active, right? So there are two ways on how a policy can be terminated, right? One is over matured. That is fine. So if you are saying what I mean by matured is the customer has paid their entire, for example, if they say for 10 years, they have paid their entire 10 years and it's complete, it's matured, right? The terminology you will get or you will find in insurance data is that there will be something called terminated, not matured, right? The reason for being terminated can either be matured or terminated, right? Now, if we take the reason for the policy to be terminated is because the customer hasn't paid for a certain amount of time. But if you look at the reason for termination as matured, that means the customer has completed his coverage of policy, right? So if your question is saying, okay, is it benefit for the customer to surrender or matured, then the answer would be matured. Yes, it is very benefit. It's going to be benefited for the customer if they have a matured policy, if they have matured their policy, right? Not surrendered or terminated. Did you understand the difference?
I mean, sir, if let's say when a customer they don't have money to pay, then literally he can wait for terminated or they can surrender.
Correct.
Yeah. Then why do they choose? If someone choose to surrender, is there benefit from?
No, there's no distinct benefit like that. Both scenarios would be the same outcome. Like there's no benefit for the customer.
Okay, sir.
It's like saying, okay, you have policy coverage for 10 years. After 5 years, you say, I don't want to pay. And then you go to the company and say, I don't want to pay this. And then that is your surrender. That means you're willingly stopping your policy. Right? You want to stop your policy. Right? Yeah. When it comes to terminated, that means you might have forgotten to pay, and you have just let the policy go without doing any payments, and it has automatically just gone to lapse, and then it has terminated. Right? So either way, the outcome is the same. Like there's no benefit.
So yeah, I have one question. Like if we can identify surrender and terminating people earlier, what are the precautions usually insurance company used to take, or do they like to not involve those kind of people in their insurance policies, or are they going to go with lower policy or something like that? Is there anything like that?
Good question. That again, I would say it depends on the company. But to give you a high-level view of how things work, it's good for the company to actually identify these set of customers, right? The reason I say that is because once they can identify these customers, they can maybe provide a better way of payments or either installments. That all depends on the company. But as an example, they maybe if they have a financial problem, what they can do is they can say, okay, we'll give you an installment phase or something, or we'll look after you, or we'll give you an extended period of time to make your payments. So these are all business calls that totally depend on the insurance company, right? But yes, for your question, it's good to identify these set of customers so that we can actually take a precautionary step before they surrender or get terminated.
Sure. Thank you.
Yeah.
Excuse me, sir.
Yep.
So now, in the point of view of the customer, surrender and terminate both have the same effect on him, customer.
Correct.
But on the perspective of the company, do both have the same effect on the company or surrender? Because surrender is a thing done by the customer with willing, right?
Correct.
So
So it still does have the same effect on the company, right? So if a customer comes to the company and says, I want to stop paying, and let's say as an example, for 10 years, you have agreed to pay for 10 years, and after 5 years, you go to the company and say, I want to stop paying, right? So in that scenario, the company will not get the money for the next 5 years of that customer, right? Similarly, yeah.
In terms of the reputation and the impact of the company on the society, wouldn't it affect that surrender principle?
I mean, so in terms of reputation and that, it solely depends on the people who actually, or the customer, right? Because I mean, if the customer goes and spreads a bad word around the company, yes, then it will affect the company. But in terms of surrender or terminated, like given the scenario in the industry, it doesn't have a big impact in terms of reputation, right? It doesn't have a big impact like that. These things are sort of actually normal. You wouldn't even believe these are actually normal scenarios that actually happen in insurance companies.
Awesome.
Cool. Yeah, I think if there's no further questions, we can move to the next part.
Thanks, Thiraj. Yeah, just need to be a little bit concerned about the time as well. But
yeah,
thank you so much, Thiraj. I think it was quite a bit of informative session actually. It's good to see that you guys are interactive with the session, and hope it helped you to at least to understand a little bit of about insurance, and then you have some time to do a little bit of research on this area tomorrow as well. And if you do have any questions, send me an email. So I'm happy to answer your questions as well. Okay, so you can get my email address from Rotaract people, so they have my email address. So I'm happy to connect with you and provide you any information. Okay, so let's move on to the second session. So we also wanted to highlight a couple of more interesting things, especially in the visualization. As a data scientist, this is one area that you also need to heavily work on in a real world use case. So let me introduce my colleague, Shashini. So she's the head of data visualization team at OCTAVE. So she will very briefly provide you some useful information for everyone about data visualization, and especially highlighting what is the benefits. So make sure you have the interactive session as well. So this will be really useful for how to present your findings. Okay, Shashini, it's over to you.
Thanks, Rajitha. Hi all, very good evening. So I will briefly talk about data visualization here. So it is the representation, the graphical representation of your findings or the information that you have, where it will use to gain insights for that will be the purpose of data visualization, where you will have insights on the data that you have gathered. So there are many benefits when it comes to data visualization. So I have highlighted 3 here, where the main benefit of this is to have good method of decision making. So data visualization helps in decision making by showing different trends over time, as well as different patterns in the data. So when it comes to visualizing your findings, you should make sure to have it visualized in a proper way in order to tell your story. If your story is not represented in your final visualization, then the purpose of data visualization will not be there. So for that, there are 3 best practices, and the first one is you should know your audience. You should know whom you are presenting your findings. So in order to that, you have to summarize your data and present the data accordingly. And secondly, you have to decide on the visual that is best for your representation. For example, if you want to show a trend, you can't use a pie chart. It should be either a bar chart or a line chart. And then finally, you have, once the visualization is done, it should represent your story, and then it is good to go. So there's an example of 2 different charts. So you can see in the top chart that the use of color, and then in the bottom. So the difference between these 2 representation it's easily visible. So when it comes to colors also, you have to make sure that you are using the colors properly, because our eyes are drawn to colors and patterns. So suppose you have red and blue written in words, but using the same colors. So initially you will know red is red using the color without reading it. So the representation of the color should be there according to your story. So that is the basic idea about how you visualize your data. So any question that you want to ask?
Yes, go ahead. Okay, so I just wanted to give you one hint for you guys. So when you want to do the visualization, think about in this way. So if you want to do the visualization, there are 2 parts. One is you are going to provide some information in a conceptual way. So the second one is the data-driven stuff. So where you do this histogram and this the correlation matrix, this type of stuff, right? So when you wanted to present something, just answer this question: am I declaring something? Okay, whether you're declaring something or exploring something, whether you want to do some exploration, right? So especially the work that you guys have done in the EDA in the first use case. So in this particular use case also, there will be a lot of EDA work too. So think about it in that way too. Okay, so that might help you to understand what type of visualization you want to do. So I'll also give a little bit of information about creating presentations as well, just a little bit. But do you have any questions? So the visualization whole area is a vast area, so it's difficult to provide you a huge amount of information within a given time. But these are very simple informations that will help you to think about how do you want to visualize the information that you have. Okay, and also especially when you start to visualize, make sure that your axes are very visible too, especially like, you know, in this particular example, like x-axis, y-axis are very clearly defined. Okay, so in real world use cases, you cannot do that. Okay, it will be a bad mark for you, for the team. So you need to spend quite a bit of time you know, when you want to present this information. So just before we wind up, sorry, before we go to the next session, do you have any questions? Otherwise, we can move to the other sessions.
No, sir.
Okay, thanks. So so this is also just a continuation of a data visualization task. So just wanted to give you a couple of you know, guidelines for the presentation and the Viva and the slide decks. So this I would like you to, you know, work on your presentation in these key areas. So one is, so you start the problem context, you know, what is the problem that you are going to solve, and the background. So you can do a little bit of about the background of the problem, and you can identify the gaps. Okay, if you are really solving a problem, you can identify the gaps, and also you can also look into the state of the art as well. You know, what is the current situation, what is the current technology. Okay, so you need to spend some time to provide this type of information too. So these analytics documents, you know, generally you provide it to the business units too. Okay, so this is very beneficial for the data science and the visualization department, and also for the business analytics and the delivery department as well. So there are like 4 or 5 departments are involving when you're creating this analytics type of presentation. So just think about that. This is your responsibility, that you need to provide analytical solution in a visual way. And then the third part is you heavily work on the methodology or the solution design. Okay, so what type of a solution that you're going to use to solve that problem. Okay, so the fourth is, so you need to do experiments as well. So where you come up with the experimental protocols, how you define, for example, simple example, training data, testing data. So what are the hyperparameters that you used? Whether you have any exploratory data analytics visualization, you need to edit this particular section. So the fifth is, this is where the most important things are going to happen. Is the number 5, the intervention. So you solve a problem using the data. So let's say you create some data modeling. So then you got some X number of accuracies. So then so what? So that's the problem that you are going to solve. So you need to come up with some actionable interventions. Okay. So most of the problems in real world. So you need to come up with these actions. What is the next step that you are going to do? So you solve a problem using some data models, and then you come up with accuracy, and then you are not done. So you need to understand what is the next thing that you can do. What are the action plans you can do? Okay, and maybe for some use cases, maybe you might need some operational departments too. Okay, maybe you might need some marketing departments too. So how you are going to communicate your insights to those departments to take some actions. So there's a lot of things happening. So these key insights, you will provide it to the business people, right? So these are the key insights. So you heavily work on like what type of actions that you can take from the use case that you saw. Okay. So this is just wanted to like give a little bit of about the presentation structure. I would love to see. So that might help you to at least structure your problem.
Excuse me, sir.
Yeah.
So experiments. By saying experiments, what do you mean, sir? I mean, by saying by saying experiments, what do you expect?
Yeah. So here experiments is, so you have the problem, right? So you have the main problem. So you can divide the main problem into subtasks. Okay, and you can solve each particular subtask in different techniques. For example, in here experiments means maybe you can solve this problem just using like descriptive analytics. So like very simple statistical inferences type of things. So all these analytics that you do, like EDA type of things, will come to here. And also if you're working on some different feature engineering things, those things will come under here as well. Okay, so you have done some different features, or these type of things will come under here. So the modern things that you are doing, so they will come under here too. The hyperparameter trainings that you are doing, those will come under here too. So the methodologies, the solution design, they are pretty much like in higher level, right? So let's say, for example, very simple example, you wanted to create like a very shallow network. So the number of neurons, number of layers, those type of, the solution architecture, the solution design will come under methodology section. In experimental protocol is pretty much like how you wanted to divide your data set. Maybe you can say, okay, X number of data I will use to training, and the rest is for the testing, or maybe I'm going to use some cross validation type of techniques, and I'm going to use, let's say, four cross validation. So I'm going to use 4 for training, 1 for testing, and this is the protocol. So those type of things. So you need to have you need to describe those things.
The techniques.
Yeah, the techniques. Yes.
Like to increase the accuracy.
Yeah, could be. Yes, could be.
Okay.
Or could be second one is maybe you wanted to reduce the time. Maybe there might be some model you can create, for example, with, let's say, some neural networks, for example, very simple. So you can create a neural network model where you can get around very high accuracy, around 95%, for example. But it will cost you 2 days for training. Okay, there might be some model where you can generate within 2 hours, but with 60% of it. So now you have a decision point. What is the model you are going after? So now when you take a decision, as I mentioned earlier, accuracy is not the only data point that you are going to take a decision. Now you have a time bound. Okay, so in this particular problem, you have 12 hours. Okay, so there's a time that involved. So what is the model that you can grab it that particular time? Or there's possibility that if you want to train some neural network models, it might cost you a lot too. You might need a good GPU. So that will cost you some amount of money where you need to buy a GPU. So those type of decisions you need to take it.
Okay. In that case, are you recommending any models for the final case?
No, I'm not recommending any models. So think about the problem and then think about the data points and decide what type of models you want to do. For very simple example, I can give it to you is so most of the time people go after these deep neural networks models. Right? So if you look at the deep neural network models, so let me see something. So if you look at this deep neural network models, so there are one decision point. One is amount of data. So let's assume the x-axis is the data. Okay. So this is the data. So the y-axis is the performance. Okay. So most of these deep neural networks models heavily work if you have a very high amount of data. Okay. For example, so let's say the performance or whatever it is. So it might go up, something like that. So you need a huge amount of data to have a very high performance. Okay. So if you have a low amount of data, it's not highly recommended you to go after this type of neural network models, because this shallow type of models might work in low level. So this is just example. This is shallow type of models, some standard machine learning models. They are pretty much outperform these deep neural networks models if the data is in a low range. Okay. So this is just one simple technique that you can use. Just look at the data and then decide. Okay. Whether you want to go with huge amount of whether you have a huge amount of data or whether you have less amount of data, and then whether you want to go after these deep neural network models or whether you want to go after shallow type of models. Okay, this is a very simple example that I can give it to you. And also just look at your resources as well. What type of resources you have, what type of cost you have, what type of expertise you have. I mean, in a real world problems, these are the decision making points solve a problem. Okay. Anything else?
No, sir.
Okay. So also just wanted to give you a little bit of about information about how to create the slides. So Shashini gave some information about about the visualization, quite a bit of information about why it is important. So top of the slides. Okay, so that's where the eye is going to be visible. Okay, and you should add only one concept of one slide. Okay, don't make it a little bit more too messy too. Okay, don't put like huge amount of text to the slide too. It's very difficult to understand for the audience. Okay, and also these couple of practices, most of the time you use light text on dark background. That's one of the practices that in heavy visualization people are working on. So, but for the time being, I'm not really looking after that. But you can use like a white background. But these are some of the tips, and also have only the key points, 2 or 3 key points. So it will be very straightforward for you to describe or discuss. Right? Don't make it like too overloaded all the slides. Okay? And also use clear, visible diagrams. As Shashini mentioned, she showed an example as well. So make sure it's very clear, including the tables and charts too. And when you want to show some plot or figure, so you make sure your x-axis, y-axis up, label clearly and it's visible. And also don't have too much of animations. So it's good to have animations, but if you overload it with too much of animations, it's going to be very difficult for the audience. Okay? So you make sure that have like if you want, you can have like a simple and very easy type of animations, but don't make it too overloaded. It's going to be very difficult for the audience to adjust to it. Okay, and also in terms of the font size, so don't use very fancy type of fonts. So the recommended font type is the Arial. So just for example, if you maybe if you go out, just look at some of the road signals. Just look at the road signals and look at their font. So they use Arial font types, especially when you are driving in the highways. Just look at those font types. Okay, this particular axis is in X amount of kilometers, and look at those font size, and also look at that background too. There's a reason that they have put those green background in a white color. There's a reason to those things, right? So they're not like accidental type of things. So scientists have spent quite a bit of time to understand why these different colors need. So as Shashini mentioned, visualization is a big area. So use Arial because that's the most eye-friendly font type. Okay, and also keep the fonts a little bit larger too, so it's easy to understand. Also avoid all capital letters as well. So go with first letter capital and the rest is simple. And also make sure you use the colors, but make sure that it has some purpose. As Shashini mentioned in her slide in here. So you can use colors, but there should be some purpose. Okay, so that it might be very easy to reader or for the judges to understand what you are going to present. Okay, so so there's a bunch of more I can give it to you, but for the time being, I think this is good enough for you to provide a good presentation and also provide a good Viva for your case study on Sunday. Yeah, that's pretty much it from us.